Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. Thanks for sharing your day with us. And busy news day is a big understatement. We're told a rare public statement from presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner could come any minute. Kushner on the moment on Capitol Hill, telling Congress he did not collude with the Kremlin during the 2016 election. This as the president himself lashes out at his own attorney general again, while also suggesting Republicans in Congress should do more to protect him. Plus, Senate Republicans hope this is the week they finally get their Obamacare Repeal Act together, but don't bet on it. And Democrats promise a better deal, outlining a new economic platform they hope appeals to liberals and to Trump voters. We begin, though, with the big new developments in the Russia election meddling investigation and big new insights into the president's mindset. With us to share their reporting and their insights, Laura Meckler of The Wall Street Journal, Perry Bacon of 538, Michael Bender of The Wall Street Journal, and CNN's MJ Lee. To Capitol Hill in a moment and today's important questioning of presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner. We'll also keep our eyes out for that public statement we are told he will make after finishing his interview with the Senate Intelligence Committee. First, though, the president's latest attack on his own attorney general and what this attack tells us. In an angry tweet this morning, the president asks why Congress, the special counsel, and, quote, of course, our beleaguered attorney general aren't investigating Hillary Clinton. Now imagine if your boss publicly called you beleaguered, and it's hardly the first public rebuke. Remember, the president twice in an interview with the New York Times last week said Sessions had been unfair to the president, and the president said he never would have appointed Sessions attorney general if he knew he would go on to recuse himself from decisions related to the Russia election meddling investigation. CNN's Sarah Murray is live at the White House. Sarah, the president is no doubt trying to send a message to the attorney general. Just what is it?
Well, that's a great question, John. It's certainly hard to believe the White House's line last week that the president somehow still has confidence in his attorney general. But so far, he's stopped short of flat out calling on Sessions to tender his resignation. Now, he was asked about this, the president, earlier today in a photo op with interns. He had some pretty classic Trump facial expressions in response. Take a look. Oh, I guess we don't have that video for you, but the president did not respond to a question about whether he wants Jeff Sessions to resign. He did offer a pretty significant eye roll, though, before moving on. I think obviously the thing to remember is that the relationship between Jeff Sessions and the president has deteriorated significantly. Sessions was one of President Trump's closest allies, one of the first senators to endorse him. But ever since he recused himself, the president essentially puts the blame on the fact that there is a special counsel investigation squarely on the shoulders of Jeff Sessions. Now, is it possible Trump is looking at other people to fill the slot? Absolutely. But we do know his advisors, both inside and outside the White House, have explained to the president, look, you could talk to Rudy Giuliani, you could talk to Chris Christie, you could talk to other people who were loyal to you and by your side during the campaign, but there's a chance that they're going to face the same pressure to recuse themselves, and you are going to be in the same boat. So it'll be interesting to see how Sessions responds to this, and if he feels like he can stay in this job with the president just publicly jabbing at him day after day in media interviews and on Twitter. John.
It is remarkable. Sarah Murray for us live at the White House. Sarah, thank you very much. Now, as we noted, Jared Kushner's up on Capitol Hill this hour answering questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee. Staff members, that's hours. This questioning is hours after the president's son-in-law and, of course, senior advisor released a lengthy statement defending his interactions with Russians during the campaign and presidential transition. In that statement, Kushner said he has now disclosed all of his Russia contacts, explains them all as innocent, and says, I did not collude nor know of anyone else in the campaign who colluded with any foreign government. CNN's Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill with more, including, Manu, we are told now we can expect a public statement from Jared Kushner when he's done with this session.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, he's actually going to expected to leave his meeting momentarily. That's why we're waiting for him here, standing in a crowded gaggle of reporters. He's going to be walking down this hallway. There are microphones set up here in case he wants to make a public statement. We are not expecting him to do that here, but we do expect him to say something publicly at the White House. Now, this comes, John, as Kushner and his team really going on a public relations offensive. If you will. We issued an 11-page statement to the committee earlier today detailing contacts that he had with Sergei Kislyak during the campaign season, which he said really was a brief interaction at the Mayflower Hotel. He also talked about meeting with the Russian ambassador and during the transitions time, including with the former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, in which they discussed having perhaps a secure line of communication to discuss issues of importance to people in Moscow. Now, the one meeting that, of course, has gotten a lot of attention over the last several days is that Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr., in which Jared Kushner also attended. Now, in his statement, John, he does discuss this meeting, and he says there was really nothing to it. He claims he really didn't know anything about this meeting with Russians who offered dirt to Donald Trump Jr., and he said that he got an email that he didn't really read. This is a part of what he said. He said that when he was at this meeting, which he arrived at late, he was looking for a polite way to leave and get back to my work. He said, I actually emailed an assistant from the meeting after I had been there for 10 minutes or so and wrote, can you please call me on my cell? He said he needed an excuse to get out of the meeting. He said, I had not met the attorney before the meeting nor spoken with her since. I thought nothing more of this short meeting until it came to my attention recently. Now, John, of course, this came to people's attention recently because Mr. Kushner was forced to amend his security clearance form because he did not include this meeting initially when he submitted this for his security clearance application. So clearly, this is one issue, John, in which investigators are going to ask questions behind closed doors. Tomorrow, he'll be going before the House Intelligence Committee and just speaking to a couple of members of the committee, including Joe Manchin, the West Virginia Democrat. They want to question him as well. The senators want to have a chance to question him as well. The question will be whether or not Jared Kushner agrees for any public hearing or any meeting with senators after meeting here with staff on Capitol Hill, John.
Mano Raju live on Capitol Hill. Mano, keep us posted. I guess somebody stretching there. It's just, you wait in those halls a long time. You got to stand up and stretch. Apologies for that little yoga demonstration there. Mano, appreciate it. Keep us posted on when Mr. Kushner leaves the room and when we expect to get that statement. Now, in addition to Jared Kushner, Donald Trump Jr. and Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort also face congressional questioning this week. And the president seems more than a little annoyed. In one tweet last night, he said the Russians are laughing, and, quote, the phony Russian witch hunt continues. Then this from the president. It's very sad that Republicans, even some that were carried over the line on my back, do very little to protect their president. Let's start the conversation there. That came in a series of tweets, most of them about health care. So it's easy to read that tweet and say the president's talking about Republicans not passing health care. It's also easy to read that tweet, especially the part about people I carried over the line, as a shot at Richard Burr, who's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who won re-election in North Carolina because of the Trump surge in the end there. So maybe we'll get an explanation at some point, but let's come to the bigger picture. The president's mad at the congressional investigation. He's lashing out as an attorney general again. I believe we can show you. Let's show you. We tried to get this to you during the Sarah Murray appearance at the White House. Let's watch the president. He's with White House interns taking a photo op. He gets asked, does he have confidence in the attorney general? Look at this. In a vacuum, that's a funny picture. The president is known for his facial expressions. He's known for his sense of humor, actually, as well. But he has now, for the third or fourth time in a week, publicly undermined the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. And as he's done so, with the context of, I appointed this person and he did not protect me from investigation. These cabinet officers swear an oath. They swear an oath to the Constitution, not to protect the president.
Yeah, and we've seen, to be sort of fair here to Senator Sessions, we've seen people survive this. I think an apt parallel here is Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon came under a lot of fire about a month ago. The president repeatedly criticized him in interviews, called him a guy who works for me. This is his chief strategist. Now he's going after his attorney general. We asked the president, or we asked the White House about the comments a couple weeks ago related to Sessions, and they insisted that he has full confidence. I think sometimes the president has trouble acting on his impulses here. I mean, if he wants to get rid of Sessions, all he has to do is say it. It took him a while to get rid of Flynn. We saw he didn't go after Bannon. I think Bannon and Sessions both represent, one of the few ties to the conservative base in this White House. But the bigger question here is this president demands loyalty from his staff, from his top cabinet, and just refuses to show that loyalty to any of them. So it's not a surprise here when you get leaks and when you get some backbiting inside his White House.
And yet, I'm going to make I agree 1,000% with everything you just said. It's a roller coaster working for this president. He can throw you under the bus, and then 2 weeks later, you're with him at the top of the peak. However, I would just make out the case that the Attorney General of the United States is a little bit different. And as I do so, I just want people to listen. We saw the tweet today. He called his Attorney General beleaguered. Asked openly, why aren't you investigating Hillary Clinton? Listen to the New York Times interview last week, which put this into higher gear.
Zero. So Jeff Sessions takes the job, gets into the job, recuses himself. I then have, which frankly, I think is very unfair to the president. How do you take a job and then recuse yourself? If he would have recused himself before the job, I would have said, thanks, Jeff, but I can't, I'm not going to take you. It's extremely unfair, and that's a mild word, to the president.
And today he calls him beleaguered again. If you listen to when the president fired James Comey, he told NBC News he did it because of the Russia investigation. He's saying here, if he knew that Jeff Sessions was not going to be there making big decisions about the Russia investigation, he wouldn't given him the job. That tells you a lot about this president's mindset.
And every bit of Washington that is involved or touching this Russia investigation, he is seeking to diminish or reject or say that they're being inappropriately disloyal. So whether that's Jeff Sessions, whether that's people on the Hill who are continuing to investigate it, whether it's the intelligence community itself who have a consensus view that Russia intervened in the election to try to help elect him, he rejects that too. Sort of, it's all around him, and he seems to think, and maybe this comes from in business where you really are the top person and you can call the shots and people sort of go along as long as you have that job. But it's different. It's different when you're president, where there are independent power centers within government that act independently and have loyalty to things other than the president himself. And I honestly don't think he understands that.
And what's striking re-listening to that New York Times interview is how personally President Trump takes this move from Jeff Sessions. Never mind that there are obviously rules and reasons why Sessions felt like he had to recuse himself because there would be a conflict of interest. President Trump sees that and remembers it clearly and has, has been holding on to sort of this grudge almost that Sessions decided to recuse himself. He doesn't view it as a decision that was necessary. He views it as something of sort of a letdown, that someone that should have been loyal to him, was clearly loyal to him during the campaign, decided to make this decision. And this is a way in which he conducts himself when he interacts with folks on Capitol Hill as well. The healthcare debate, when he sees that someone like Dean Heller is on the fence, he turns to him and says, look, you want to stay in the Senate, don't you? You can tell that personally affects him and sort of personally offends him.
Is it just that? Is it just this personal sense of pride, personal sense of slight for people who aren't loyal to him? Despite, Michael, you make an excellent point, he shows no loyalty back to people. He does not bite his tongue when he's disappointed in people. He lashes out at them. Or to the bigger issue about, again, if you look what happened to Comey. You hear what the president's talking about his Attorney General. You put this in the context not of Trump writ large, but Trump and this investigation. Why does he need people to protect him if he's done nothing wrong, which he said from the beginning?
And I see the way he brought up Sessions in the New York Times interview, then brought it up again today. Maybe this is an argument for if Jeff Sessions catches the hint and goes ahead and resigns, I can pick an AG who is going to be loyal to me in the way I want. And that's the sort of broader implication.
But can he do that? Again, let's assume for the state, let's assume the president has done nothing wrong. Let's assume the president has done nothing wrong. Wouldn't he make his political mess, the political ditch, a whole lot deeper if he fired his Attorney General now or forced him out now? If Jeff Sessions suddenly says, I can't do this,
the same thing happened with Comey. It was exactly the same dynamic with Comey. He made his case, made things so much worse for himself. In fact, it was the firing of Comey that led to the appointment of the special prosecutor. So if he was thinking that way, I think we would have seen different actions along the way. I don't think he understands that really, or appreciates that at least.
Debate, and this all happens. So this all happens in the context of new communications director for first full day today, Anthony Scaramucci. Sean Spicer resigns. The question is that the end, or is there more coming at the White House? I don't know what to make of this, but Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign manager, speaks to the president from time to time. He's on television today, and this.
Look, Reince Priebus works directly for the President of the United States, and it is the President's prerogative to determine how long Reince Priebus works for. And I think what the President has said very clearly is that he wants to make sure that the leaks that are taking place in his White House are eradicated. And if the President doesn't see the success that he wants, then he will continue to make changes.
They complain, senior White House officials, all the time that we and the media are manufacturing this sense of crisis and chaos in the White House. The President himself calls his Attorney General beleaguered after giving an interview where he twice says he's being unfair to me. The former campaign manager, who we know continues to speak to the President of the United States, goes on television and clearly, we know he's no friend of Reince Priebus, but clearly stirs up the idea, well, maybe the Chief of Staff's in trouble too. Find me a management book that says this is the way to do it.
And we saw the new comms director immediately say in the first comments, I report to the President, in other words, not the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff has been disempowered in every way possible, continually.
I mean, the other problem that Reince Priebus has is that he sort of is neither fish nor fowl. He's not a Trump loyalist. He doesn't have a base of support among the Trump supporters. But he also isn't like really a guy who knows how to govern either. I mean, people call him an insider, but he had no government experience himself. He had political experience, but not government experience. So it's not like he knows how to run the White House, necessarily in some sort of special way. So I think that, it kind of leaves him.
My bottom line on this, though, is whether it's true or false, all this, this person's in trouble, that person's in trouble, it hurts the President. It hurts the President to have this discussion going on. And the discussion is being stoked not by us, but by people who say they're loyal to the President. They're hurting the President. A quick break here. When we come back, remember, we're waiting. Jared Kushner finishing his questioning before staff members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We're told he will make a public statement after that appearance. That would be a rare public statement. We almost never hear from Jared Kushner. Also, Senate Republicans come back to work this week. They say they're going to move on to the Obamacare repeal debate on the Senate floor. They just won't tell us what that's going to look like. We'll remind you with these live pictures, one at Capitol Hill, one just outside the West Wing at the White House. We are waiting. Jared Kushner, the President's son-in-law and his senior advisor, meeting with staff members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's been there for more than 2 hours now, answering their questions about the Russia election meddling investigation. We are told Mr. Kushner plans to make a rare public statement. We believe it will be at the White House. We're going to watch him exit up on Capitol Hill, and we'll watch the White House as well. We'll bring that to you live when it happens. That's just one of the big stories here in Washington today. Also tonight, the Senate Republican leadership meets to plot its way forward on health care. Now, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell promises an Obamacare repeal debate this week on the Senate floor. But exactly where the debate would start, or even whether he has the votes necessary to start it, is an open question. CNN's Phil Mattingly is live on Capitol Hill. Forgive me, Phil, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical. Will this really be the week the Senate debates?
Yeah, maybe. Look, at least that's the goal of Senate leadership, and I think you hit the key point here. The beauty of Senate procedure is you have to vote to even start the debate, and that's what they're planning to have this week, as soon as tomorrow. Leadership aides are saying that's the tentative goal right now, and the reality is they need 50 votes to be able to move forward on that. The reality also is they don't have 50 votes, at least as of this morning, to move forward on that procedural vote. So as long as they don't have those votes, they can't move on to the actual debate on the bill. Now look, John, you know this process and this place quite well. What they're doing behind the scenes right now is really kind of twisting arms, pushing their members, saying, look, you will be able to offer whatever amendment you want. You can make this bill look however you want it to make. We just need to start debate on this process. Allow us to start debate. And the incentive here for leadership is, if you start debate on this bill, and they would be starting debate on the House health care bill and then be amending it as such as they feel necessary, if you start debate, the ability to have this bill fail, the pressure that would come upon the Republican members to vote no at the end of this entire very lengthy amendment process would be a lot. They want to start this process because they know once this process kicks into gear, it becomes exponentially more difficult to vote no in the end. But again, the real question right now is, can they start this process at all? And I think the big issue they're having right now is a lot of senators are saying, look, we don't want to go into this blind. We want to know at the end of the day what that substitute amendment, to use the Senate language, that we all agree upon is going to be. What are we going to, what's our end game here? Do we have everything in place? And as we all know quite well, that replace amendment, how they're going to actually move that forward, there is currently no deal there. There is no kind of negotiation that has reached a compromise agreement to where they would be on that. And so long as they are short of that, the reality remains that they likely will be short to proceed on the vote. One quick note here, John, I think this is important. If this goes down tomorrow on the procedural vote, the idea that they're just going to throw up their hands, move on to tax reform and call it a day. Don't bet on that. I think there's a lot of feeling behind the scenes right now that they're starting to move closer, and that if this fails tomorrow, that might actually add some incentive with pressure from the base to keep going. This healthcare thing isn't dying anytime soon, John.
Phil Mattingly on Capitol Hill tracking that. We'll continue the healthcare conversation in a moment, but there you see the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the tall gentleman in the middle there, walking out of the staff committee room. He's on Capitol Hill. He was being interviewed by the staff of the Senate Intelligence Committee, again, about Russia election meddling. He released an 11-page statement this morning saying, yes, he had several contacts with Russians during the campaign and during the presidential transition, but he said they were all about policy issues. He said nothing nefarious took place. We are told we will get a rare public statement from Jared Kushner. Let's listen as he walks past.
Ms. Kushner, you signed my Russian flag? Will you testify publicly, sir? On my Russian flag.
Reporters trying to shout some questions at him there, and also, as always, somebody up there with a stunt saying, will you sign my Russian flag? That happens in a democracy. You get protesters and what I like to call stunt dummies here in Washington around, as well as the reporters trying to ask their questions. Yes, you can see Mr. Kushner not entertaining any questions there as he leaves the Senate office building. We are told, though, he plans a public statement. We expect that to happen when he makes it back to the White House. We will, of course, bring it to you live. A very dramatic day. The committee has been gathering information, requesting documents for months. The Senate Intelligence Committee, just one of the investigative committees on Capitol Hill. House Intelligence Committee will hear from Jared Kushner again tomorrow. This represents a new chapter in the sense that some of the bigger witnesses now going before these committees on Capitol Hill. Mr. Kushner is leaving the building now. We'll let him get to the White House, and we expect to hear from him. We'll bring you that conversation. Let's come back, and if we see Mr. Kushner again, please tell me, and we'll track his movements up on Capitol Hill. But let's come back to the important health care conversation, because if you're an American and your health care is in a flux, or if you're thinking about changing your job and you're worried about how that would impact your health care, and you're looking to Washington for answers, it's been 6 months of wait, we're not sure, wait. The question is, will they get to it this week? And we talk about the politics of this all the time. Phil Mattingly brilliantly laying out the internal calculations among senators here. Can they get to 50 votes to start the debate? Then can they reach a compromise? If you're an American watching at home, no matter where you live in the country, and you have any health care issue in your family, and again, we're going to show you these live pictures of Jared Kushner. Forgive me for going back and forth between health care and this. He's leaving the Senate office building, hopping into his car. We applaud effort, but we sort of knew there was not going to be an answer to that question as Jared Kushner gets in the car. Short drive back to the White House. We'll see what happens when he gets there. Can they do this? Can they do this? Including one of the questions in this debate from day one has been the president's role. Congressional leaders often say he has undermined them by tweeting certain things at certain times, or saying this is open to negotiation when they're trying to close the deal and get to a final vote. The President of the United States will, at 3 o'clock this afternoon, before going to West Virginia, whose Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito is one of the issues. She's a no vote right now. Will the president today move this forward with either what he says at the White House, or perhaps even more importantly, that's in Washington, get going, we need to do this, we've promised this, or what we haven't seen, and what a lot of Republicans say, why haven't we seen more of this, Mr. President? Get out on the ground where it really matters and try to change a vote.
The indications from the White House this morning, the folks in the press shop told me that he plans to appear this afternoon with what they like to call Obamacare victims. He's going to explicitly ask the Senate to move forward on a motion to proceed, ask them then to repeal and replace it, and tell them what's sort of become a mantra in this White House, that inaction is not an option. That starts to look more like a sort of a typical president, typical administration trying to move forward an agenda that would be on point to what Republican senators, Senate leadership wants to do. It may be a little too late at this point. And then tonight, when he gets in front of a crowd, kind of who knows what happens there.
And the who knows is the interesting part, because if the president's going to do what you just said, that will be applauded by Republican leaders on Capitol Hill. The President of the United States using the bully pulpit, the platform of the White House, to say we have an obligation and responsibility. We promised this, let's start the debate and get to the finish line. Last week, he had the Pontius Pilate at the White House where he said, I'm not going to own it if this collapses, which infuriated Republicans. So you've had these mixed signals from the president, and they need his help. Sometimes they say they don't want it because it's been back and forth like a yo-yo, but they need it.
Well, they do, but they also need some sort of substantive plan that they can agree to, that can bring together moderate Democrats, Republicans, and very conservative Republicans. There is a very large ideological span within the Republican Senate caucus. So, you know, I think that and I think a lot of senators probably are not real confident about whether Trump is going to have their back at the end of the day, given what we've seen so far. You know, he praised the House bill and then called it cruel later on. So, you know, I think that they're going to have to feel comfortable voting for the bill on its merits, that they feel like they can defend their vote and not depend on President Trump to back them up or to save them if it turns out to be unpopular, which we know, by the way, it is unpopular.
And it's really pretty remarkable that we could see a vote taking place tomorrow, a procedural vote, but a lot of Senate Republicans feel like they don't even know what the end goal here is, right? They don't know if the goal is to do a repeal and replace bill or a repeal only bill, which was McConnell's latest attempt and latest strategy. And the president going out there, you know, as you said, he's been so back and forth. You know, he has said that he wanted a repeal only, and then he said that he wanted repeal and replace. And it's not as though Senate Republicans really need the pressure right now. They already feel the pressure. They understand the gravity of potentially reneging on this promise that they've been making for 7 years. Now it's a matter of, you know, whether McConnell can get the votes to at least bring this up for a vote so that he feels like, look, he can say to the public, we had a vote and we tried to get this done and we really couldn't.
Well, it's a messy process. To your point, it's a very complicated issue. Both the politics and the policy have produced a greater divide among Republicans as they've been trying to close them. We'll see if this is the week they can get there. Again, we're going to head to a quick break, but remember, Jared Kushner making his way from Capitol Hill to the White House. We expect a very rare public statement from the president's son-in-law about what he told the Congress. We're asking him questions about Russia election meddling and his meetings with Russians during the campaign and the presidential transition. Also, up next, the president's new communications chief says he has a source who says it isn't clear that Russia meddled in the election. That source flies around on Air Force One. Remind you, we're standing by. That's just outside the West Wing of the White House. You see the Marine at the door. The podium set up there for Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. He's on his way back to the White House from Capitol Hill. He's just given question and answer session with the Senate Intelligence Committee staff. We are told he will make a rare public statement. We're going to keep our eye right there as we continue the conversation here about related issues. Forget that ironclad conclusion of the U.S. intelligence community or the certainty voiced by every leading member of Congress. The new White House communications chief, Anthony Scaramucci, disclosed just yesterday to CNN's Jake Tapper that he has a secret source. All those hacks and other election meddling, well, this big source says it was too amateur to have been orchestrated by the Kremlin.
Somebody said to me yesterday, I won't tell you who, that if the Russians actually hacked this situation and spilled out those emails, you would have never seen it. You would have never had any evidence of them, meaning that they're super confident in their deception skills and hacking.
Wow. Oh, never mind.
How about it was the president, Jake?
Okay, it's the consensus of the intelligence committee.
He called me from Air Force One, and he basically said to me, hey, you know, this is, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't do it.
Today is Mr. Scaramucci's first full day, so maybe we can help. These guys run the big U.S. intelligence agencies, and the first two, hand-picked political appointees by the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
I am confident that the Russians meddled in this election, as is the entire intelligence community.
There is no dissent, and I have stated that publicly.
Everyone's on board.
And I've stated it to the president.
No doubt at all, and I stand behind the intelligence community assessment that we produced in January.
Why?
I think Anthony said.
I mean, just why? You know, look, I understand he has an audience of one, especially in these early days. I'm going to be contrarian and say maybe he's going to use this platform, maybe these earlier appearances to impress the president. I'm out there fighting for you, Mr. President. So then he can go into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, I need you to dial back this. I need you to do this differently. I'm going to hold out hope and see that that happens. However, why? Why would you enable the president's refusal to say Russia did it, period? When again, you know, Mike Pompeo is a Trump guy. Dan Coates is a Trump guy. Admiral Rogers has worn the uniform for decades. They say there's no if here.
Well, you're saying why would he do that? I mean, he was just named to the job, presumably because he was willing to go out and say things like that. So I don't know that it's all that puzzling. I mean, he was chosen by the president, not by the chief of staff, and presumably it was because he was willing to say this sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Anthony Scaramucci is definitely confident in his own abilities, and you're right, John. We'll give him some time to see if that plays out and that can affect this White House. The fact is, he's a brand new to government, coming in from business, and he's going to have the same problems that Kushner and that Donald Trump have seen as well here. You know, he's made his mark. He's made his sort of first mandate here to get rid of the leakers. You saw on Jake Tapper's show, he just blurted out what he and the president talked about on Air Force One, to say nothing of what we saw all day long on Sunday of the mixed messages coming from his shop, including him. I mean, he was asked about the Russia sanctions bill, so the president wasn't ready to sign it. At almost the same time, Sarah Sanders was saying that the White House favors it. You know, there's several examples of this throughout the day.
And that, I was going to get to that earlier in the program, and the chaos on Capitol Hill took time away from us. That's important, though. There was whether, you know, you could say Anthony Scaramucci not fully up to speed yet. He said he wasn't sure. He would have to talk to the president. Sarah Huckabee Sanders says the president will sign a very important bill. Now, he may have no choice in the sense that Congress is going to pass a new sanctions bill this week. Looks like with overwhelming majorities in both the House and the Senate, veto-proof majorities in the House and the Senate. The president could have picked this fight, it appears. We'll see if the story changed. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders suggesting he will sign it. On that issue of leaks, the president has complained repeatedly about leaks, and a lot of times the Team Trump has suggested they come from holdovers or they come from people in the so-called deep state, people out in the agencies. A lot of the leaks come from people who work for the president. Anthony Scaramucci seems to understand that. Listen to this about day one on the job today.
I'm going to have a meeting with the communications staff and say, hey, I don't like these leaks. And so we're going to stop the leaks. And if we don't stop the leaks, I'm going to stop you. It's just really that simple.
What happens to leakers on your watch?
They're going to get fired. We're as strong as our weakest leak. So if you guys want to keep leaking, why don't you guys all get together and make a decision as a team that you're going to stop leaking. But if you're going to keep leaking, I'm going to fire everybody. It's just very binary.
That is his right, and it's one of the reasons the president's brought him on. But again, we are 6 months and a week into this administration. Yes, they've done some things through executive power. Yes, the economy's going at a pretty good pace, but no Obamacare repeal and replace. Tax reform is nowhere, or at least sitting at the starting line. Infrastructure, and you still have an administration that appears to be trying to figure out how to manage itself.
I'm curious. Go ahead. Well, I'm curious to know whether Anthony Scaramucci spoke with the president off the record or on background, because he certainly gave away his source. Look, you know, he spent the weekend, you know, walking back some of his earlier criticism of the president from during the campaign. And he did that because he clearly is now working for the president. But I think he's about to find out that that awkwardness is going to be nothing compared to how impossible this job is to be a spokesperson for the president. The president is constantly off message. He's constantly veering from one thing to another, and sometimes even erratic in, you know, going back and forth in what he wants and what he's expressing. So what he has faced this weekend in trying to explain his earlier criticism of the president is not going to be anything. And I think the Jeff Sessions thing was a perfect example. That the president said today that the attorney general is beleaguered. Remember, a couple of days ago, Sarah Huckabee Sanders went out there and told the press, look, the president clearly has confidence in the AG. These two things do not go hand in hand.
I'm not sure if Scaramucci was lying or clueless, but the idea that the leaks are from low-level press staffers who he can fire very easily is probably a misunderstanding of where the leaks are coming from. The leaks are from senior staffers fighting with each other, fighting over the agenda, and he's not going to close that down because the leaks are a symptom of a larger problem, which is the White House is divided internally.
You know, one thing that President Trump and President Obama have in common, not a lot in common, one thing they have in common when things weren't going well, blaming the communications. That's the problem, is how we're talking about it. It's the leaks, it's the messaging, as opposed to the actual policy itself, or actually in the case of Trump's lack of policy, or this whole Russia investigation. I mean, this is not a communications problem primarily.
Right, and consistency in the sense that the president, candidate Trump and President-elect Trump said for months there were no contacts. There were no contacts. Jared Kushner, who were waiting to speak at that podium, just told Congress, yes, I had some contacts. Now, he says there was nothing wrong with them, but there were contacts. There were contacts, and if there was nothing wrong with them, they could have put this behind them weeks and months ago, and that goes for several other people, too, including the Attorney General's meetings with Russians. Another issue, he lashed out at the leakers. He said he had a secret source that turned out to be the president, who said that, you know, I still don't believe that the Russians did this, even though just about everybody else who breathes believes the Russians did this. And then a mixed message on the question. Last week, the president was tweeting about, I have the power to pardon. And everyone said, what is this rumination? What is he thinking about, again, in the context of the Russia meddling investigation? So is the president actively considering pardoning somebody? Here's one of his attorneys, and Mr. Scaramucci.
We have not and continue to not have conversations with the President of the United States regarding pardons. Pardons have not been discussed, and pardons are not on the table.
I'm in the Oval Office with the President last week. We're talking about that. He says he brought that up. He says, but he doesn't have to be pardoned. There's nobody around him that has to be pardoned.
It depends on your definition of we.
Right. Looks like Anthony would be good for us, if only because he seems to be blurting out everything he and the president talk about. We're learning things we didn't know. The White House had denied the discussion of pardons. Anthony's like, no, we discussed it. I mean, so that is a useful thing to think about. Is this guy seems at this point, at least right now, to be so eager to brag about his contacts with the president that he's sort of like reading out his conversations.
One of the things that was troubling, and I think you can put the idea that he considered the president, the president told him still maybe, when it comes to the issue of Russian meddling. If you work for the President of the United States, you want to help him through that. You don't want to enable that because look at every intelligence agency, every leading member of Congress, people appointed by President Trump who have access to this intelligence believe it to be true. The other was in his debut performance at the White House last Friday, he was asked, does he agree with the President that the President would have won the popular vote if it were not for 3 to 5 million undocumented in this country illegally voting?
Candidly telling you that?
Said 3 million people voted illegally.
Okay, so
stand by that or not?
So if the president says it, okay, let me do more research on it. My guess is that there's probably some level of truth to that.
I mean, if you say 3 to 5 million and you can find a couple thousand, there's some level of truth to that. But again, why?
Yeah, he's speaking from the White House here. This is the podium. He's speaking for the White House, for the president here, and it's going to come back here quickly that this is not, the sort of PR that Anthony is used to, and he's going to have to. He's responsible for what he says here, and if the issues at the White House, leaking is one of them, but a bigger one, I believe, is credibility, and Anthony, I'm not sure he did much to sort of solve that this weekend.
Well, we'll give him some time to get settled in. It's his first full day at the White House. We'll see if things change going forward. Again, we're showing you that live picture just outside the West Wing because Jared Kushner due to make a statement after his return from Capitol Hill. Key Q&A with the Senate Intelligence Committee about the Russian election meddling. We'll bring you that as soon as it happens. And when we come back, Democrats hitting the reset button, rolling out what they call a better deal for America. Their plan for winning back crucial blue-collar workers who voted for Donald Trump. Welcome back. They call it a better deal and are hoping it's the first big step toward putting a painful 2016 in the rearview mirror. A new Democratic Party economic platform is being released today. It calls for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, tax credits for job training, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and a reform of corporate mergers. Now, in trying to turn the page and in trying to appeal to those blue-collar voters who left the Democrats to support Donald Trump, top Democrats are acknowledging Hillary Clinton did a pretty lousy job connecting on the economy.
When you lose an election with someone who has, say, 40% popularity, you look in the mirror and say, what did we do wrong? And the number one thing that we did wrong is we didn't tell people what we stood for. They know we're standing up to Trump. They like that. But they want to know, what do you stand for?
That's a fair diagnosis that, in the 2016 campaign, Hillary Clinton made no doubt, made no secret. She didn't like Donald Trump, didn't trust Donald Trump, didn't think Donald Trump was qualified to be president. But I think it is more than fair to say, that the president won Pennsylvania, he won Wisconsin, he won Michigan because of his appeal to voters who had anxiety about globalization, anxiety about the economy, and she did not speak to it in a compelling way. So you've diagnosed the problem. Do they have the solution?
Well, I think there's a real temptation for Democrats and critics of President Trump to often just sort of sit back, lean back with a bucket of popcorn and watch the drama, watch the controversy that is constantly swirling around the president. But yeah, this is an indication that Democrats, national Democrats, are sort of recognizing with some urgency that you can't always have your message be, look at the other guy, look at the other party that's flailing. You need a message that is your own. And I remember, seeing this during the campaign when I was traveling with Hillary Clinton, there were often days and weeks when there was supposed to be sort of a policy theme, a theme to what she was supposed to be talking about, but that, you know, often got overshadowed by the latest sort of Trump misspeak or Trump drama, and I think Democrats are trying to make sure they don't repeat that mistake.
But we should say, though, that most of the specific policy ideas on this list are things that actually were part of the Hillary Clinton agenda.
Right.
So it isn't really, I mean, she had policy from, you know, Alzheimer's to Zika. I mean, she had so much policy that you couldn't even absorb it all. The question is, what did she talk about? What did she emphasize? What kind of messages did she send? And I think that the question for Democrats going forward is going to be, yes, they have a basket of ideas. How are they able to frame them a positive agenda, or do they get sucked into just responding to Trump because he is the sun in our political universe?
It's the connection challenge. It's the connection challenge. You're right about the policy ideas, and those are familiar Democratic ideas. Trump ran on some ideas that were not familiar Republican ideas, especially on trade. One of the reasons he won the White House was because of his views on trade. But you got the impression, Trump voters got the impression, this guy's going to fight for me. He's going to fight for me. He's going to remember me. I will be relevant to his presidency, which Hillary Clinton, you know, for all her strengths, was a more detached person who made no connection with people. How do the Democrats, when you have a Republican president, a Republican Congress, both House and the Senate, 30 Republican governors, how do you break through and say, give us another look? Even if you're still with Trump, at least study us. Give us a look.
Yeah, I think that Democrats, the risk here for Democrats is overthinking this. You know, Schumer's talking about, you know, saying we didn't say enough about what we believed in. That's a fair point, but I think the bigger point is who they had saying it. Right. The Wall Street Journal, NBC had a poll out last week that looked at counties Trump won. In those counties, Hillary Clinton's approval among independents was like 12 or 14%. Abominable. I mean, and then we also asked Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' approval in those same counties was 41, 42%, which was higher than Trump's. And I think the takeaway there is that in these counties, that Clinton may have lost the election as much, if not more, than Trump won it.
I would say, and to that point, let me just jump in, because one of the things we don't do enough, because we're a program based in Washington, is actually listen to voters. I like to get out and travel when I can, but our Gary Tuckman went out and talked to some Trump voters last week. And an area where Trump has suffered some, or if you look at the polling, is a lot of the independents who came to Donald Trump. Some of them are having second thoughts. Here's one.
I feel like I'm Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole. It has been a disaster. Where is him bringing together Republicans and Democrats and working his deal with them? Where is it? It ain't there. He's golfing.
On the flip side, and the president's standing among independents who voted for him has gone down. On the flip side, though, there are a lot of Trump voters out there who, yeah, they say the president might be having problems getting things done, but they don't blame him. They blame the atmosphere here in Washington. A lot of them also particularly blame the Republican leadership in Congress, not the president. Listen.
He can't speak without getting ripped apart. If you just leave him alone, let him do his job. He's a hell of a businessman. Let him run the business.
It's like Vietnam. He's being stopped before every time he gets to this line. He's being stopped.
As the Democrats try this bit of a rebranding, one of the interesting dynamics out there is, yes, the president's overall poll numbers are lousy, but he's held his base pretty firm, and that's a credit to the president.
Well, true. Of course, a base isn't enough to win an election. Right. The question, I think the biggest question for the Democrats is the candidates. I mean, these ideas are all well and good, but the biggest problem that they need is they need good candidates, and that was the problem, arguably, in these special elections that they lost, is that the candidates were not that great.
It'll be interesting to watch as these folks come forward. We're going to sneak in one more quick break. We're showing you those pictures just outside the White House because we are waiting for a statement, rare public statement from the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He's just back from an important question and answer session on Capitol Hill. We'll be back in just a second.